The great hall of the Galactic Council fell silent as the emergency transmission played for the third time. Commander Vresh stood at the center of the circular chamber, his forearms trembling slightly as he watched the council members absorb the devastating news. His translucent skin rippled with colors that the translator identified as deep sorrow and fear. The holographic display above showed his homeworld, a beautiful blue and green planet that had been home to the Quilner people for over 10,000 years. But now their sun was dying. Not slowly over millions of years as stars should, but catastrophically within days. Massive solar flares erupted from the surface, each one larger than the last. The radiation was already making the planet uninhabitable. "Honorable members of the council," Vresh said, his voice translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. "We have 40 million people who cannot evacuate with our current ships. Our technology was never designed for such extreme conditions. The radiation levels are climbing every hour. The gravitational stress from our sun's instability is tearing our orbital stations apart. We need help." Around the curved chamber, representatives from dozens of species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They were the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy, yet none of them moved to offer assistance. Ambassador Teshin of the Valorians finally spoke, her elegant features marked with genuine sympathy. "Commander Vresh, we understand your situation is dire. However, the conditions around your world are beyond what our vessels can handle. The radiation alone would kill my crew within minutes. The temperature fluctuations would melt our hull plating. I am sorry, but what you are asking is impossible for us." One by one, other council members echoed similar sentiments. The Korthians explained their ships could not handle the gravitational stress. The Melkari pointed out that their biological systems would fail in such high radiation. The Zentari, known for their advanced shielding technology, calculated that even their best shields would collapse within an hour of entering the danger zone. Vresh's colors shifted to a pale, almost white shade, despair. He had known this would be difficult, but hearing the refusals, one after another, crushed his remaining hope. 40 million of his people, including his own family, would die. The Quilner civilization, ancient and peaceful, would be reduced to the few thousand who had already escaped on the limited ships they had. "Please," Vresh said, his voice breaking. "There must be something. Someone. We are not warriors. We are artists, philosophers, teachers. We have never harmed anyone. We just want to live." The silence that followed was heavy with guilt. These were good people, these council members, but they were not suicidal. The mission was simply beyond their capabilities. They had evolved on gentle worlds with stable stars and predictable climates. They had built their civilizations in safety and comfort. A junior diplomat from the Rothani delegation, a young female named Kessa, raised her hand hesitantly. "Honorable Council, I may have a suggestion, though it is unconventional." Toshan nodded for her to continue. "There is a species we recently made contact with. Their world is cataloged as a Class 12 death world. The species calls themselves humans, and their planet is called Earth." A ripple of discomfort moved through the chamber. Death worlds were planets so hostile that the Council had long believed intelligent life could not evolve there. Class 12 meant the planet had multiple extinction-level threat systems, extreme weather, dangerous predators, frequent natural disasters, and deadly microorganisms. Most council members had never even visited a Class 5 death world, let alone a Class 12. "You cannot be serious," one of the Melkari representatives said. "Deathworlders are dangerous, unpredictable. They have only just discovered faster-than-light travel. Their technology is primitive," Kessa nodded. "Yes, their technology is less advanced than ours, but their biology is not. Humans evolved to survive constant threats. Their bodies can handle radiation levels that would kill us. They can endure extreme temperatures, high gravity, and hostile environments. They have survived on a planet that has tried to kill them every single day of their existence. And what makes you think these primitive survivors would help us?" Another council member asked. "They do not know us. They have no obligation to risk themselves." "I have been studying their culture as part of the first contact team," Kessa said. They have something they call empathy. It drives them to help others, even strangers, even at great cost to themselves. Their history is full of examples of individuals sacrificing themselves to save people they never met. Tishan considered this. It is highly irregular. We would be asking a non-council species, barely spacefaring, to attempt what our greatest civilizations cannot do. But they might survive where we cannot, Kessa pressed. And Commander Vresh's people will certainly die if we do nothing. The council debated for another hour, but the reality was simple. They had no other options. Finally, they voted to send an emergency transmission to Earth, though few believed anything would come of it. They were asking barbarians from a nightmare world to be heroes. On Earth, in the command center of the United Nations Space Command, Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing supply reports when the communication came through. The message was marked with the highest priority level, and the encryption was unlike anything Earth had seen before. It took the computers 20 minutes to decode it. When the message finally played, Sarah watched in growing amazement. Aliens. And they were asking for help. No, they were begging for it. She replayed the portion where Commander Vrush made his plea, saw the desperation in his alien features, heard the fear in his voice. Sarah immediately called for an emergency meeting with her senior staff. Within the hour, she had assembled her best people around the conference table. She played the message for them, watched their reactions mirror her own shock. Can we do it? She asked her chief engineer, David Park. David pulled up the data that the aliens had included. Radiation levels, gravitational measurements, temperature ranges. He whistled low. It would kill most of the alien species they mentioned. But us, we have shielding designed for solar radiation. Our hulls are built to handle re-entry temperatures. The gravity is only 1.4 times Earth normal. It would be hard, maybe the hardest thing we have ever done. But yes, I think we can do it. It would be risking everything. Her second-in-command, Commander James Rodriguez, said, Our ships, our crews, for aliens we have never met. Sarah looked at the frozen image of Rush on the screen, at his forearms outstretched in supplication. She thought about 40 million people waiting to die. People who had done nothing wrong, except have the bad luck of orbiting a dying star. They asked for help, Sarah said quietly, and we can give it. That is enough. Within 6 hours, Earth's response was sent back to the Galactic Council. It was simple and direct. We are coming. Hold on. 3 ships began preparations for immediate launch. The UNSC Indomitable, Perseverance, and Defiance. Humanity's finest vessels would carry humanity's answer to the stars. The crews were all volunteers, and there were far more volunteers than available positions. Everyone wanted to be part of humanity's first mission to the stars, even knowing the risks. As Captain Sarah Chen boarded the Indomitable, she looked back at Earth one last time. Their beautiful, terrible, dangerous home. The planet that had forged humanity in fire and ice, in predators and plagues and earthquakes and hurricanes. Maybe, she thought, all that suffering had been for a purpose. Maybe Earth had been preparing humanity for exactly this moment. The ships launched, carrying Earth's answer to the galaxy. The Deathworlders were coming. The 3 human ships moved through space faster than the Galactic Council thought possible. What should have taken weeks based on their understanding of human technology was accomplished in days. The Council observers monitoring the approaching vessels could not understand it. These humans had only developed faster than light travel 2 years ago. Yet they pushed their engines with a confidence that seemed reckless. Aboard the Indomitable, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge watching the stars streak past. Her crew of 200 worked around her with practiced efficiency. They were soldiers, engineers, doctors, and scientists. Every single one had volunteered knowing they might not come home. Sarah had made sure each person understood the risks before accepting them onto her ship. Captain, we are receiving a transmission. From the Quilner evacuation coordinators, her communications officer announced. It on screen, Sarah said. The view screen flickered and showed Commander Vrushi, looked even more desperate than in the original message. His translucent skin showed swirling patterns of blue and purple that the translator identified as anxiety and hope mixed together. "Captain Chen," Vresh said, "we did not believe anyone would come, especially not so quickly." "We are grateful beyond words," Sarah nodded. "Commander Vresh, we are approaching your system now. Please send us the evacuation coordinates and a full list of all remaining population centers. We will get your people out." "Captain, you must understand the conditions. The radiation is increasing every hour. Our own people can only spend minutes on the surface now, even in protective suits. The gravity fluctuations are becoming more severe. We have lost 3 more orbital platforms since we sent our first message." "We understand, Commander. Earth prepared us for harsh conditions. We will manage." Vresh's colors shifted to something the translator struggled to identify. It was close to disbelief. "You are very confident for such a young species." Sarah smiled. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.' Our planet has been trying to kill us since the beginning. We learned how to survive." As the human fleet entered Quilner space, the first real test began. The radiation belt surrounding the dying star was immense. Council ships monitoring from a safe distance watched as the 3 human vessels pushed directly into it. Alarms would be screaming on any council ship. Crews would be evacuating 2 shielded sections. But the humans simply adjusted their shields and kept going. Inside the Indomitable, the crew felt the difference. The ship's radiation detectors climbed steadily into what would be lethal ranges for most species. But humans had evolved under Earth's sun, which bombarded their world with radiation. They had developed resistance over millions of years. Their ships were built with shielding designed to protect against solar flares and cosmic radiation. "Radiation at 60% of maximum shield capacity," the tactical officer reported. "Noted," Sarah said calmly. "Continue on course." Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the ship's chief pilot, guided them deeper into the system. He was a veteran of Earth's space program, had flown rescue missions during the lunar colony disaster 3 years ago. He had pulled survivors from a damaged habitat while a solar storm raged around him. This was bigger, more dangerous, but the principle was the same. Keep calm, trust your equipment, get the job done. The human ships made orbit around the Quilner homeworld. For the first time, the crew saw what they were dealing with. The planet was beautiful even in its death throes. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. It reminded many of them of Earth, but the sky was lit up with constant lightning from electromagnetic storms. The surface temperature readings fluctuated wildly, swinging from freezing to boiling in minutes as solar radiation battered the atmosphere. The Quilner evacuation coordinators sent docking codes for their remaining orbital platforms. The humans began the delicate process of matching orbit and preparing to receive refugees. This was when the 2 species finally met face to face. Commander Vresh and his team came aboard the Indomitable first. They moved gracefully despite the slightly higher gravity, their forearms moving in elegant patterns as they walked. They stood 7 feet tall, towering over most of the human crew. Their translucent skin was fascinating to the humans, showing internal structures that pulsed with light. But the Quilner were equally fascinated by the humans. They had expected the Deathworlders to be large, brutal-looking creatures. Instead, they saw beings shorter and stockier than themselves, with dense muscle and bone structure. The humans looked solid, compact, built for strength rather than grace. Their skin was opaque and came in various shades. Their faces were expressive in ways the Quilner found almost overwhelming. Dr. Amara Okonkwo, the mission's chief medical officer, approached Vresh with a warm smile. She was a tall woman from Nigeria, with kind eyes and steady hands. She had brought her entire medical team and had been studying what little information they had on Quilner biology. "Commander Vresh, I am Dr. Okonkwo. We have prepared medical facilities for your people. We understand you may have injured or sick among those waiting for evacuation." Vresh's color shifted to a warm orange. "Doctor, we have many who are suffering from radiation sickness. Our medical facilities on the surface are failing. But can your medicine even work on us?" "Our biology is very different," Amara smiled. "On Earth, we have millions of different species. We learned long ago how to adapt our medicine for different biological systems. We will help your people. The first shuttles launched toward the surface within the hour. Lieutenant Marcus Webb piloted the lead shuttle with a crew of 20. As they descended through the atmosphere, the shuttle shook violently. The electromagnetic storms created turbulence that would have torn apart lighter craft. But human shuttles were built to handle Earth's hurricanes and volcanic ash clouds. They were overbuilt, over-engineered, designed by people who knew that nature was always more dangerous than you expected. Marcus landed in the middle of a Quilner city. The buildings were tall and elegant, made of crystalline materials that caught the light beautifully. But many were crumbling now, unable to handle the seismic activity caused by the gravitational stress. Quilner families waited in organized groups, getting their possessions packed into small containers. When Marcus and his team emerged from the shuttle, the Quilner nearest them stepped back. The humans were wearing environmental suits, but even through the suits, they looked intimidating. They moved with purpose, with strength, with an efficiency that spoke of danger. "It is okay," Marcus said through the translator on his suit. "We are here to help. Please, start loading. We do not have much time." The Quilner hesitated for only a moment before the first family moved forward. Marcus helped them into the shuttle, noting how light they were, how delicate. He had to be careful not to grip too hard, not to move too fast. They were fragile compared to humans, and he did not want to accidentally hurt anyone. The loading process went smoothly for the first hour. Shuttle after shuttle landed loaded refugees and returned to the orbiting ships. The humans worked with a speed that amazed the Quilner. They did not slow down, did not complain about the heat or the radiation or the shaking ground. They simply kept working. But then the dying sun decided to remind everyone why this mission was so dangerous. A massive solar flare erupted, larger than anything predicted. The sky turned white with radiation. Alarms blared on every human ship and shuttle. The electromagnetic pulse that came with the flare was powerful enough to disable half of the remaining Quilner orbital platforms. 2 human shuttles lost power temporarily, their electronics overwhelmed. They fell from the sky, unpowered, heading for a crash that would kill everyone aboard. But human pilots trained for worst-case scenarios. They had backup systems for their backup systems. Emergency power kicked in, and the pilots wrestled their shuttles back under control, landing hard but safe on the Indomitable. Sarah watched the radiation readings spike to levels that made her stomach clench. They were beyond the safety margins now. Her crew would start feeling the effects soon. But 40 million Quilner still needed evacuation. "All ships, this is Captain Chin," she said over the fleet-wide channel. "Continue operations. I repeat, continue evacuation operations. We came here to do a job, and we are going to finish it." Down on the surface, Marcus helped a Quilner child into his shuttle. The child looked up at him with large, luminous eyes. Through the translator, a small voice said, "Are you scared?" Marcus knelt down to the child's level. "Yes," he said honestly, "but I am here anyway. That is what brave means." The child's colors shifted to a bright yellow. The translator said it meant admiration. The solar flare changed everything. What had been a difficult mission became a desperate race against time. The dying star was becoming more unstable by the hour, and the safe window for evacuation was closing faster than anyone had calculated. Captain Sarah Chen made the hardest decision of her life. She ordered all shuttles to remain on the surface and continue loading refugees. Even as radiation levels climbed into ranges that were supposed to be impossible to survive, the Quilner evacuation coordinators protested. They did not want the humans to sacrifice themselves. But Sarah was firm. They had come to save 40 million people, and they were not leaving anyone behind. Every human on the mission had understood the risks. They had all chosen to be here. Dr. Amara Okonkwo was already treating the first cases of radiation sickness among the human crew. 3 shuttle pilots came to medical bay after their exposure alarms went critical. They were vomiting, shaking, their skin showing the first signs of radiation burns. But they refused to stop working. "Doc, just give me something for the nausea," one pilot said. His name was Chen Park, a young man from Korea. "Can still fly." There are still people down there. Mara wanted to order him to bed rest. That was the proper medical response. But she looked into his eyes and saw the determination there. She had seen that look before on Earth, in disaster zones and war zones. It was the look of someone who would not stop until the job was done, or they dropped dead. She gave him the anti-nausea medication and a shot of anti-radiation drugs. 2 more runs, she said. Then you are done, whether you like it or not. Chen Park nodded and headed back to his shuttle. On the planet's surface, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. Sergeant James K.O. led a rescue team into a Quilner city on the northern continent. This area had been marked as fully evacuated, but new sensor readings showed life signs in a collapsed building. The structure had come down during the latest seismic event, trapping people inside. James and his team of 8 soldiers approached the wreckage carefully. The building had been some kind of learning center, made of the same beautiful crystalline material as other Quilner structures, but it had not been designed to handle earthquakes. Earth buildings were reinforced, designed to flex and absorb shock. These buildings were rigid, and when the ground shook, they simply shattered. Spread out, James ordered. Look for entry points. Be careful. This whole thing could come down on us. They found a gap in the debris and squeezed through. Inside, they used their suit lights to navigate the darkness. The Quilner trapped inside had been calling for help, but their communications were weak. James followed the sound of voices until he found them in what had been a classroom. 12 Quilner were trapped, including several children. A piece of the ceiling had fallen and pinned one of the adults. The Quilner were trying to lift it, but they did not have the strength. They were not built for heavy labor. Their elegant forearms were designed for delicate work. For art and music and precision tasks, James assessed the situation quickly. The debris piece was large, probably weighing close to a ton. On Earth, it would take specialized equipment to move it. But James and his team were wearing powered exoskeleton suits, and they had something else the Quilner did not have. They had muscles built from millions of years of carrying, lifting, and surviving on a high-gravity world. Martinez Johnson with me, James said. Everyone else, get ready to pull them out as soon as we lift. The 3 soldiers positioned themselves around the debris. James counted down. 3, 2, 1, lift. The servos in their suits whined with effort, but the real work was done by human muscle and bone. They lifted the massive piece of debris, their bodies straining with effort that would have injured most species. The Quilner watched in shock as these shorter, stockier beings did what should have been impossible. The other soldiers pulled the trapped Quilner free. The injured one was hurt badly, one of her forearms crushed, but she was alive. The Quilner children clustered around James, their colors showing patterns he could not identify. The translator was struggling to keep up. "Can you walk?" James asked the injured Quilner. She tried and collapsed. Without hesitation, James picked her up. She was tall but light, probably weighing less than a human child. He carried her easily, even with his own equipment. "Let's move, people. This building is not going to stay standing much longer." They made it out just as another tremor brought down the rest of the structure. James delivered the Quilner to a waiting shuttle and went back for more. His radiation alarm was screaming, telling him he had exceeded safe exposure limits. He ignored it. Back on the Indomitable, engineer Rachel Torres faced her own crisis. The ship's shield generators were failing. The constant bombardment of radiation was degrading the systems faster than expected. If the shields failed completely, everyone on board would die within minutes. The refugees, the crew, everyone. Rachel reviewed the damage reports and realized what needed to be done. Someone had to go outside the ship, in the middle of a radiation storm, and manually reset the generators. It was suicidal. The radiation outside the shields was at levels that could kill in seconds. She did not bother asking for volunteers. This was her ship, her engines, her responsibility. Rachel suited up in the heaviest radiation suit they had. It was designed for emergency repairs during solar storms, built with layers of lead and advanced materials. It would buy her maybe 10 minutes before the radiation got through. "Torres, this is insane," her assistant engineer said. "The suit is not rated for this level of radiation." "Then I better work fast," Rachel said. She stepped into the airlock and waited for it to cycle. When the outer door opened, she was hit with a wave of radiation so intense that her suit's alarms all triggered at once. The numbers on her radiation counter climbed so fast they blurred. She had minutes at most. Rachel moved along the hull using magnetic boots. Each step was careful, deliberate. One mistake and she would drift off into space. She reached the first generator and opened the access panel. Her hands were already shaking from the radiation. She could feel it burning through the suit, through her skin, to her bones. She worked with the speed and precision that came from years of training. Reset the first generator, move to the second. Her vision started to blur. The radiation was affecting her nervous system. She blinked hard and focused. Second generator reset. Moved to the third. By the time she reached the fourth and final generator, Rachel could barely see. Her hands felt like they belonged to someone else. But she had trained for this. Earth's space program demanded excellence because space was always trying to kill you. You learned to work through pain, through fear, through impossible conditions. The fourth generator reset. The shield stabilized. Rachel had done it. She turned to head back to the airlock and collapsed. Her suit's emergency beacon activated automatically. Inside the ship, her team scrambled. They pulled her back in, got her to medical. Dr. Okonkwo took one look at Rachel's radiation readings and knew it was bad. Very bad. But she went to work anyway, using every treatment in her arsenal. Rachel had saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Now Amara would fight to save hers. Captain Sarah Chen visited Rachel in medical bay. The engineer was unconscious, her body fighting against radiation damage that would have killed a Quilner instantly. Sarah put a hand on the medical bed and made a silent promise. They would finish this mission. Rachel's sacrifice would not be wasted. The evacuation continued through the night. As the planet's sun threw out more flares, human shuttles went up and down, never stopping. The crews were exhausted, sick from radiation, running on stimulants and pure determination. But they kept going. The Quilner refugees packed into the 3 human ships watched these strange beings work, themselves to the point of collapse. They saw humans with radiation burns continuing to fly shuttles. They saw soldiers who should have been in medical care pulling people from collapsed buildings. They saw engineers repairing systems while vomiting from radiation sickness, Commander. Resh stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched Captain Sarah Chen coordinate the evacuation. The human captain had not slept in 40 hours. She had not eaten in 12. But she stood at her post, making decision after decision, never wavering. Captain Vresh said quietly, "Why do you do this? You owe us nothing. You barely know we exist. Yet you sacrifice your crew, your ships, yourselves. Why?" Sarah looked at him with tired eyes. "Because you needed help. Because we could give it. On Earth, we have learned that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. That does not make it any less right." Rachet's color shifted to deep purple. The translator identified it as profound respect. The Galactic Council believes Deathworlders are dangerous savages. But I see now that they are wrong. You are the most civilized beings I have ever met. Sarah smiled tiredly. "We are still figuring it out, Commander. But we try." The final shuttles lifted off from the surface carrying the last refugees. All 40 million Quilner were now aboard the 3 human ships. But they were not safe yet. The star was entering its final death throes, and the real challenge was just beginning. They had to escape the system before it exploded. The Quilner star died with fury. Deep inside its core, the final fusion reactions collapsed in a cascade failure that sent shockwaves rippling through the entire system. The sensors on all 3 human ships screamed warnings simultaneously. They had maybe 2 hours before the explosion reached them. 2 hours to get 40 million refugees and 3 damaged ships out of the blast zone, Captain. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and looked at the display showing their position. They needed to reach the edge of the system to safely jump to faster than light speed. At maximum speed, they could make it with 30 minutes to spare. But their ships were not at maximum capacity anymore. The shields were damaged, the engines were running hot, and the life support systems were overloaded with millions more people than they were designed to carry. Whole ships. "This is Chen," Sarah said into the fleet-wide channel. "Prepare for emergency acceleration. Push everything to maximum. We are leaving now." The three ships began to move, their engines blazing bright against the darkness of space. But almost immediately, problems appeared. The Perseverance, carrying 15 million Quilner refugees, reported engine fluctuations. The Defiance had shield emitters failing. The Indomitable's life support was struggling under the load. Inside each ship, the conditions were becoming desperate. The Quilner needed different atmospheric conditions than humans. They required more humidity, slightly different oxygen levels, and cooler temperatures. The human crews had tried to accommodate this. But with so many refugees packed into spaces designed for much smaller numbers, the environmental systems were failing. Engineers ran through the corridors making repairs on the fly. They rerouted power, bypassed damaged systems, and jury-rigged solutions that would make any proper engineer cry. But proper engineering was a luxury they did not have. They needed solutions that worked right now, even if those solutions would never pass any safety inspection. Chief Engineer David Park on the Perseverance watched his reactor readings with growing concern. The temperature was climbing into the red zone. They were asking too much from the engines, pushing them beyond their designed limits. But what choice did they have? Slow down and die in the explosion, or push forward and hope the engines held together. "Reactor temperature at 110% of maximum," his assistant called out. "Keep pushing," David ordered. "We can handle it." But he was wrong. 10 minutes later, the main reactor began to fail. The fusion containment field started to collapse. If it failed completely, the reactor would explode and take the entire ship with it. 15 million Quilner and 200 human crew would die instantly. "Shut down the reactor," David shouted. "Switch to backup power." But the backup power would not be enough to maintain life support for everyone. They would have maybe 6 hours of air before people started dying. And they still had 90 minutes until they could jump to safety. David looked at the reactor readings and understood what needed to be done. Someone had to go into the reactor chamber and manually reset the containment field. The chamber was flooded with radiation that would kill whoever went in within minutes. But if nobody went in, everyone would die anyway. He did not tell anyone what he was planning. He just started walking toward the reactor chamber, pulling on the heaviest radiation suit he could find. His assistant engineer, Maria Santos, realized what he was doing and grabbed his arm. "Chief, you cannot go in there. It is suicide." David smiled at her. "Someone has to, Maria, and it is my reactor. My responsibility, and let me go. I am younger. I have less exposure already." "No," David said firmly. "You are going to take over as chief engineer. These ships need to get home, and they will need someone who knows how to keep them running. That is you now." Before Maria could argue further, David sealed his suit and entered the airlock to the reactor chamber. The radiation counter on his suit went crazy the moment he stepped through. The levels were beyond anything he had ever seen. His suit would not protect him for long. Inside the chamber, the light from the failing reactor was blinding. The containment field flickered and sparked, barely holding. David moved to the manual control panel, his hands already shaking from radiation exposure. He could feel the radiation burning through his suit, through his skin, cooking him from the inside out. His vision started to blur. He blinked hard and focused on the controls. First, he needed to stabilize the field. His fingers moved over the panel, muscle memory from thousands of hours of training taking over. The field stabilized slightly. Good. Now for the reset. The reset procedure required a specific sequence of commands. David's hands were shaking so badly now that he had trouble hitting the right buttons. He forced himself to slow down, to breathe, to focus. Each button press was agony. The radiation was destroying his nervous system. Finally, the last command entered. The reactor hummed as the containment field snapped back into full strength. The temperature began to drop. The Perseverance's engines roared back to full power. They would make it now. 15 million Quilner, and 200 crew would live. David tried to walk back to the airlock, but his legs would not work anymore. He collapsed against the reactor wall, his suit's emergency beacon activating automatically. Through his fading vision, he saw his team burst into the chamber and drag him out. They got him to medical, but Dr. Chen Williams, the Perseverance's medical officer, knew immediately that it was too late. David had absorbed enough radiation to kill 10 men. The fact that he was still conscious was a testament to human endurance. But there were limits even to that. David looked up at Maria Santos as she stood by his medical bed. "The reactor," he whispered. "Did it hold?" "Yes, Chief. It is running perfectly." "You saved us all," David smiled. "Good. That is good." His eyes closed and did not open again. The news of David's sacrifice spread through all 3 ships. The Quilner refugees did not fully understand what had happened, but they knew that one of the humans had died saving them. They began to gather in the ship's common areas, creating displays of light with their bioluminescent skin. It was their way of honoring the dead. Back on the Indomitable, Rachel Torres regained consciousness in medical. Dr. Amara Okonkwo was there immediately, checking her vitals. Rachel's radiation exposure had been severe, but she was young and strong, and the treatments were working. She would survive, though she faced months of recovery. "The shields?" Rachel asked weakly. "Did they hold?" "They held," Amara confirmed. "You did it, Rachel. You saved everyone." But the crisis was not over yet. The explosion behind them was gaining speed. The 3 ships were running as fast as they could, but the blast wave was faster. Captain Sarah Chen calculated that they would reach the safe jump point with only minutes to spare. Then the Defiance reported another problem. Their faster-than-light drive was damaged. They could run at normal speed, but they could not make the jump that would take them to safety. And there was no time to repair it. Captain Maria Rodriguez of the Defiance made her decision quickly. She ordered the Indomitable and Perseverance to take her refugees. They could transfer everyone using emergency evacuation procedures. Her ship would stay behind, and buy the others time by creating a debris field that might slow the blast wave. "Negative, Defiance," Sarah said immediately. "We are not leaving you behind. You do not have a choice, Sarah," Maria replied. Her voice was calm, accepting. "My drive is dead. I cannot jump, but I can give you the time you need to save everyone else. My crew understands. We volunteered for this knowing we might not come back." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to find another solution, but the numbers did not lie. There was no time to transfer the refugees and repair the drive. The explosion would hit them before they could do both. Commander Vresh, standing beside Sarah on the Indomitable's bridge, watched this exchange with growing horror. The humans were discussing sacrifice so calmly, so matter-of-factly, it was incomprehensible to him. These people had come from another world to save strangers, and now they were preparing to die to ensure those strangers survived. But then, Sarah's tactical officer, Lieutenant James Park, spoke up. "Captain, I have an idea. It is crazy, but it might work." "I am listening," Sarah said. "The Defiance cannot jump, but we can tow her. If we link all 3 ships together and synchronize our drives, we might be able to pull her through the jump with us. That has never been done before," Sarah said. "No. But the math works. Probably, maybe. It is our best shot." Sarah looked at the clock counting down to the explosion. They had 40 minutes. "Do it," she ordered. "All ships, prepare for emergency link-up. This is going to be rough." The 3 ships moved into formation. Using magnetic grapples and physical tethers, they connected themselves together. It was a fragile chain of damaged ships carrying 40 million lives. The engineers synchronized the faster-than-light drives, something that should have taken days of careful calibration. They had minutes. The blast wave from the dying star was visible now on their sensors. A wall of radiation and superheated plasma expanding at incredible speed. They had 5 minutes until it hit them. "Drive synchronization at 80%, the engineering team reported. "It is the best we can do. It will have to be enough," Sarah said. "All ships, prepare for jump. 3, 2, 1, engage." The 3 ships, linked together in a chain, activated their drives simultaneously. Space twisted around them as they tried to punch through into faster-than-light speed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality bent, and they were falling forward into the impossible. The jump was violent. The ships shook as if they were coming apart. Alarms blared. Systems failed across all three vessels. But they were moving, falling through the layers of space faster than light. Behind them, the Quilner star exploded in a fury of light and energy that would have been visible from galaxies away. But the three human ships were already gone, carrying their precious cargo to safety. The three human ships dropped out of faster than light. Speed at the edge of a green and blue world. The Galactic Council had designated this planet as the new home for the Quilner refugees. It had similar atmospheric conditions to their lost homeworld and was far from any dying stars. It was a place where they could start again, but the human ships barely made it. The emergency link-up and synchronized jump had pushed them beyond their limits. The Indomitable's engines were offline. The Perseverance had hull breaches on 3 decks. The Defiance was running on backup power only. They were held together by temporary repairs, determination, and luck. A fleet of Galactic Council vessels waited in orbit around the planet. They had come to witness the outcome of the rescue mission, expecting to find wreckage and casualties. Instead, they found 3 battered but intact human ships carrying all 40 million Quilner refugees. Every single one had survived. Ambassador Teshin of the Valorians led the council. Delegation that came aboard the Indomitable. She walked through the corridors with growing disbelief. The ship was a wreck inside. Pipes were exposed where panels had been removed for repairs. Cables ran across floors and ceilings where systems had been rerouted. The air smelled of sweat, burned circuitry, desperation. But everywhere she looked, she saw humans and Quilner together. Human crew members were helping refugees with their belongings. Quilner children played with human soldiers who showed them pictures of Earth on their communication devices. Dr. Amara Okonkwo worked in medical bay with Quilner doctors. Treating both human and Quilner patients side by side, Taishan found Captain Sarah Chin on the bridge. The human captain looked exhausted. Her uniform was stained and torn. She had dark circles under her eyes from days without sleep, but she stood straight and proud as the council delegation entered. Captain Chen said, "The Galactic Council did not believe this mission was possible. We were wrong. You accomplished what we thought could not be done." Sarah nodded tiredly. "We did what needed to be done, Ambassador. That is all." "That is not all," Taishan said. She looked around the ruined bridge, at the crew working at damaged stations. "May I see the rest of your ship? I need to understand what happened here." Sarah led the council delegation on a tour. They saw the makeshift repairs, the jury-rigged systems, the sections of the ship that had been opened to vacuum and sealed again with whatever materials were available. They saw the medical bay where dozens of human crew members were being treated for radiation sickness. They saw the empty station where engineer Rachel Torres had worked before her sacrifice, and the memorial that had been placed there with her name, in the Perseverance. They learned about Chief Engineer David Park. They saw the reactor chamber where he had died saving 15 million lives. The crew had placed a plaque there with words in English that the translator struggled with. Finally, it settled on something close to the meaning. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down their life for their friends. Commander Vresh accompanied the council delegation. His colors shifted constantly through patterns that showed grief, gratitude, and amazement. When they finished the tour and returned to the Indomitable's main hangar, he asked to speak. "Members of the council," Vresh said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd of humans in Quilner, "when I came to you with my people's desperate plea, you told me the mission was impossible. You were honest about your limitations, and I understood. Your species evolved on gentle worlds. You built your civilizations in peace and safety. You were never meant to survive what my world had become." He paused, his colors shifting to deep purple. "But then these humans came. These Deathworlders. Species from a world that tried to kill them every day. And they did not hesitate. They flew into radiation that should have killed them. They worked in conditions that should have broken them. They sacrificed themselves for people they had never met, for a species they just discovered existed. Vresh's voice broke slightly. I watched these humans suffer through radiation sickness and continue working. I watched them pull my people from collapsed buildings while their own bodies were failing. I watched Engineer Torres go outside the ship into a radiation storm to save us. I watched Chief Engineer Park walk into a reactor chamber knowing he would die, just so the rest of us could live. He turned to face Captain Sarah Chen directly. You told me that on Earth you learned that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. I did not understand then. But I understand now. You showed us something the Galactic Council forgot long ago. True civilization is not about advanced technology or comfortable worlds. It is about choosing to help others even when it costs you everything. The Quilner in the hangar began to glow. All 40 million of them across the 3 ships did the same. Their bioluminescent skin lit up with a pattern of gold and white light. It was their highest honor, given only to those who carried others through fire at great cost to themselves. They called it Varishkai, and no species in the council had ever received it before. Ambassador Techen watched this display and felt something she had not experienced in centuries. Shame. The council had dismissed these humans as dangerous primitives. They had looked down on Deathworld species as savage survivors, too brutal and unrefined for civilized space. But the council was wrong. She approached Sarah and bowed in the Valorian manner, a gesture of deep respect rarely given to other species. Captain Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I apologize. We judged your species without knowing you. We saw where you came from and assumed we understood what you were. But we were wrong. Tishon straightened and looked at Sarah directly. You possess something we lost long ago in our comfortable evolution. You have courage, compassion, and sacrifice. You understand that with great strength comes great responsibility. The Council would be honored if humanity would consider joining us. Not as a junior member waiting to prove yourself, but as an equal. We need what you have to teach us. Sarah looked at her exhausted crew, at the Quilner refugees they had saved, at the damaged ships that had brought them all to safety. She thought about David Park dying in a reactor chamber. She thought about Rachel Torres nearly killing herself to repair the shields. She thought about every crew member who had pushed through pain and fear to do the right thing. We accept, Ambassador, Sarah said. But we have one condition. Earth wants to help. If there are other species in danger, other impossible rescues, other situations where someone needs to fly into the fire and pull people out, we want to be the ones you call. That is what we do. Teshin's expression showed surprise, then understanding, then respect. You truly are remarkable. Very well, Captain. The Council agrees to your terms. The evacuation of the Quilner refugees to their new homeworld took 2 days. The Council provided ships and resources to help. The humans stayed in orbit, their crews resting and beginning proper repairs, while the Quilner established their first settlements on the surface. On the final day, Commander Vresh came to say goodbye to Captain Sarah Chen. They stood in the observation deck of the Indomitable, looking down at the green world below. My people are calling it New Quilner, Vresh said. But among ourselves, we call it something else. We call it Sanctuary, because that is what you gave us. A safe place when we had none. I am glad we could help, Sarah said. You did more than help, Captain. You changed everything. The Council has kept itself isolated, comfortable, safe. But you showed us that safety without purpose is just slow death. You reminded us that the strongest among us have a duty to protect the weakest. Vresh's colors shifted to bright gold. The Quilner will never forget what humanity did. We will tell this story to every generation. We will teach our children about the Deathworlders, who came from a terrible world and became the best of us all. Oh. Sarah smiled. We are still learning, Commander. We make mistakes. We fight among ourselves. We are far from perfect. Perhaps Vresh said. But when someone cried for help, you answered. When the galaxy needed heroes, you came. That is what matters. The human fleet left the Quilner system 3 days later. The ships were still damaged, still held together with temporary repairs. But they were space-worthy enough for the journey home. As they prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed, Sarah stood on the bridge and thought about what came next. Earth would be changed by this mission. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They were part of something bigger now, part of the Galactic Council. But more importantly, they had proven something to themselves. Earth's harsh environment had not made them cruel or brutal. It had made them strong and compassionate. They understood suffering because they had survived it, and that understanding made them want to help others survive too. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, back at the helm after recovering from radiation sickness, prepared the faster-than-light drive. Course laid in for Earth, Captain. Ready to jump on your command? Sarah looked around her bridge at her crew. They were bandaged, exhausted, and scarred. Some of them would carry the effects of radiation exposure for the rest of their lives. But every single one of them was smiling. They had done the impossible. They had saved 40 million lives. Take us home, Lieutenant, Sarah said. The Indomitable jumped toward Earth, carrying her crew and the knowledge that humanity had found its place among the stars. They were the Deathworlders, forged in fire and hardship. And when the galaxy needed courage, when someone needed rescue from the impossible, humanity would answer. They always would. Behind them, on New Quilner, the first human embassy was being built. It was a simple structure, nothing fancy or elaborate. But above its entrance, the Quilner had placed an inscription in both their language and English. It read, "Here stand those who came through fire for strangers. Here stand the Varshkai. Here stand humanity." Then across the Galactic Council space, other species who had dismissed humans as primitive Deathworlders began to reconsider. Maybe these beings from the terrible world called Earth had something to teach the galaxy after all. Maybe strength and compassion could exist together. Maybe the most civilized species were not the ones who lived in comfort, or the ones who chose to endure hardship so others would not have to. The universe had learned something new, and it would never look at Earth the same way again.